Hello and welcome to Jaw Law. I'm your host, Joe McGregor from Dallas, Texas, from the law firm of McGregor and Oblad. And today we're going to talk about whether or not it's worth working for a DSO.
Any material communicated on this podcast is for general informational purposes only and is not intended to be legal advice. Nothing herein should be considered to create an attorney-client relationship. Please consult an attorney for legal advice on your matter.
Hey friends, I have somewhat of an odd commercial to advertise. What you know is that I am a dental lawyer by day, but what you don't know about me is that I am a photographer by night. One of the things I do as a photographer is I teach other photographers, particularly young photographers, how to take better pictures and how to use their cameras better. If there's one thing I've learned over the years about dentists is that a lot of them have nice cameras, especially ones sitting around their clinic, and they have a love to travel. So I'm combining these two loves to offer a workshop. This coming February 2025, I'll be taking a small group of dentists to Cuba to team up with another photographer who's probably the best photographer in all of Cuba to spend 3 days learning how to use your camera, how to take better pictures, both in the clinic, for branding, and how to just take better photography, better travel photos. And what's more is you're going to get to see a dimension of Cuba that you might not otherwise get to see. And since tourism is banned to Cuba, you're also going to get to experience Cuba that most Americans don't get to experience. To learn more about this opportunity, you can go to the Jaw Law website. That's www.jawlawpodcast.com. And on that site, there's going to be a link to my photography website. And there you will be able to learn more about this opportunity and also register for the trip. If you have any questions, contact me on my cell, 972-975-2215, and I hope to see you in Cuba. Okay, so I admit it. The lead-in was a little bit misleading. I want you to know that as an attorney, and I think most attorneys are like this, and probably a lot of people are like this, but as an attorney, we can always see both sides of this issue. Furthermore, I'm also a practical person. I think that sometimes when we have convictions or like a belief, that we can also see, okay, well, even though I think this, here are the pros and cons. So for instance, I think we're past the debate of whether or not DSOs are a good thing and a bad thing. They just are, right? But today we're going to talk about DSOs for those who are seeking a first job, and we're necessarily going to talk a little bit about the pros and the cons. This is not some kind of criticism of DSOs. I can have my own personal beliefs about whether they're useful or not useful, but this isn't like a referendum or an opinion piece about DSOs, and I want to get that out there right away because I'm going to say some things that maybe might be interpreted as anti-DSOs. But don't take it that way. Even if I were to be anti-DSO, that's not going to be something that's useful to people. That debate's not useful, at least not from me. And so everything I'm about to say is meant to be useful for those people who either are considering a DSO job or are in a DSO job and you're thinking about, am I ready to move on from the corporate world? Now, most of the episodes that we do are motivated by a conversation, and this is no different. And in fact, it's motivated by two different conversations that I had this past week. And coming from this from two different sides, but one of the conversations was a new grad, somebody who is, well, I guess they're not a new grad because they're in residency, but basically wondering if the corporate job they're about to take is going to provide the training that they're looking for. And in fact, that's why she was wanting to take this corporate job, because she had a question about whether or not a private practice would be able to train her the way that she wants to do. She wants to do something kind of specialized, and she's joining a group, kind of just a borderline DSO, that is used to doing the type of thing that she's doing. And that's going to become relevant here in a second. And the other one was a conversation that I had with a client talking about some incentives being offered by corporate in contrast to a job he was contemplating in the private practice sector that did not have some of these incentives. And that's where I want to start today. Let me paint a picture for you. It's your first job, you're still in school, you're about to leave school, and you're entertaining a corporate offer. A lot of these corporate offers will have some incentives. Sometimes they'll have a signing bonus. In fact, that's becoming more of a thing. And as recruitment gets sometimes heated, sometimes you'll see even higher, like surprisingly high signing bonuses. You're starting to see things like 401k, sometimes paid vacation, pretty handsome continuing education allowances. You're seeing more and more offered to either new grads or young dentists. Contrast that with what we typically see in the private world, which is the pretty traditional concept of getting paid by collections or production sometimes, but you're getting paid a percentage, and that's basically all it is. You're getting this percentage, and if you don't work, you don't get paid. And a lot of times, the benefits program is not going to be as robust as a corporate group. So a lot of times there's not a 401k. There's not some of these other things. We do often see continuing education and some other benefits like that, like maybe membership in a dental society, small things, but not usually a signing bonus and not usually things like a retention bonus, stuff like that. Now, if you've never worked in dentistry and you lay those two offers down, let's say, just for the sake of argument, let's say they're both offering 28% of collections. On the surface, the corporate job is always going to look better because it's going to have 28 of collections and also $5,000 signing bonus, $5,000 per year CE credits, a $10,000 retention bonus after a year, things like that, a 401k, 2 weeks of paid vacation somehow. And then the private job is just going to say, hey, 28% of collections and $1,500 for CE or whatever. It doesn't take a math expert to see that the corporate job is going to be better. But you have to ask yourself, why is that the case? Let me just say that it's entirely possible that the corporate job is the better job, however you define it. I'm not saying that's not the case, right? That's not where this is going. Where this is going is a question, and maybe a two-part question. I think that the better an offer starts to look, you have to ask yourself, why? Why does this place need to throw all this money at me? And I get it. You've been a student for 1,000 years. You have just an inordinate amount of debt. You're ready to get money. Getting a $10,000 signing bonus check the day you sign, oh man, that looks amazing. But you have to ask yourself, why do they need to do this? Why do they need a retention bonus, right? That's clearly a problem. And now they're trying to solve it with money because that's the language they speak. Why? The next question you need to ask yourself, where is this money coming from? Like I said earlier, the debate about whether DSOs are good or bad or here to stay doesn't matter, right? They are a part of our lives. And what you have to ask yourself is, what is it that's so attractive for private equity groups and investors to own a dental practice? Well, it's the cash. Let me ask you, where do you think that cash is coming from? Do you think they're really saving that much money on like cotton swabs? They're getting that much of a deal on supplies that That's where their cash is coming from. They're not getting better lease rates. They're not paying the staff less. Think about it. And this is not, I promise, is not trying to criticize the DSOs, but that cash is coming from you, right? And just think about it. If they can pay you just a little bit less, because I promise that is happening in the marketplace. The wages, like the nominal wage for dentists, is going down. Who's losing out? It's you, the worker. What they're doing is they're saying, hey, I will pay you $10,000, which is more money than you've ever held in your hand at one time. I will gladly give you this $10,000 because you're going to make me $100,000 next year. You think you're getting a bonus. Really, you're just getting a cut of your money back. To be clear, that same calculation happens a little bit on the private sector side too. So I'm not saying that that doesn't exist in the private world. I'm just saying that it is a pretty cold calculation. That's why we see it in the corporate world, because it's an easy trade. And so when you're comparing the two, you need to think about that. Are they just being nice and giving you an extra $5,000 to sign the contract? No, it's part of the calculation. They know how much money they need to make, and you need to realize where that $5,000 is coming from. I think that as a follow-up question you need to ask yourself, what are the other objectives that this environment is going to teach me? So for instance, I actually think DSOs are useful in teaching you about business systems, because the reason they're that successful is because they figured some things out. It's not a bad idea to be in an environment where some things, maybe not everything, but a lot of things are being run well. And that's an opportunity to learn. In a way, it's like a business residency. And if you want to own your own practice, there are probably some valuable business tips to pick up. At the same time, if you go work in private practice, same thing. What are you going to learn there? Is it because that provider has a certain clinical skill set that they're going to pass along to you? And is there a program in place that's going to transfer that knowledge to you? Or does that private practice just want someone to do the easy stuff, the drill and fill, while they do the fun and fancy dentistry? And then finally, I think when you're comparing these contracts, particularly with corporate contracts, you want to ask yourself, how are they going to fill my schedule? I think this is probably one of our biggest problems in both domains, both corporate and private, getting your schedule filled, and particularly with the cases that you want. But lots of promises are made in the recruitment process. I will say we seem to have this problem more on the corporate side. They're willing to hire someone and not have enough work for that person, and that person calls 6 weeks later and says, hey, they're not filling my schedule. I'm working like half time. And if you don't have a daily guarantee or some other type of salary, that's going to be a problem. We don't see that as much on the private practice side, because usually that's an individual and they know whether or not they can afford and staff an associate. And I think probably there's the human element where it's a lot more embarrassing and awkward to say, I hired you, I thought we'd be busier, but we're not. So sorry, can you just sit around for a little while? The corporates, there's less of that human element. And so for whatever reason, and this is not just like one corporate, this is a thing in the corporate world, not all of them, but a lot of them, pretty consistently we'll see people report back to us, hey, they're not keeping me as busy as I was told, that I was led to believe, and I feel like I am being limited in the amount of money I can make. That 28% doesn't sound so good anymore, and my daily guarantee is about to run out in a month, so how do I get out of my contract? Those are the conversations we're having way more often with corporate jobs rather than private jobs. So anyway, what was the point of this episode? The point is, if you're a student or you're a young dentist and you're comparing the opportunities in the private world and the corporate world, just remember where these incentives are coming from. They're coming from you. And secondly, you got to ask yourself, why are they offering this? Is it really that hard to find an associate that you need to pay me a bonus? Is it really that hard to stick around? That's why you need to pay a retention bonus. Why are they doing that? And just remember, it's a lot easier to offer you $10,000 than $100,000. You offer you 28% instead of 30% or 33% or whatever else. When I started doing this, the wages were a lot higher. Now they're pretty consistently low, especially in the corporate world. And you just got to know, hey, that's where my money's going. My money is going to fuel this corporate machine. And if you're okay with that, that's your business. That's totally fine. But just know that when you're comparing the two, that's what's happening. That extra money is going to them. And that's not to say that in the private world, that extra money is not fueling that guy's Tahitian vacation. It's just something to ask yourself and to think about when you're trying to compare apples to apples, because it's not really. It's apples to oranges in a lot of respects. And you just have to ask yourself these questions. So I hope that was helpful. Hope that was heard in the right light. Again, not trying to throw shade at anybody involved. You just got to know what you're dealing with. And when you know what you're dealing with, you're able to be critical of the contract in the right way. And I hope that was helpful. If it was helpful, please feel free to share and review us online. Thank you so much. We'll see you next time.